Hey YouTube, it's Cobalt. Deal with the shaky camera video. Doing it on the phone as usual. Today I'm making a video that is probably not going to be very popular with a lot of people due to the subject matter, but it is something that I agree with. So there it is. So today we're going to be talking about felons and gun ownership. Now, I understand why people feel the way they do about felons and guns. Oh, they shouldn't have them. They are felons. They could be dangerous. They could be. They also might not be. Okay. So, getting a couple things out of the way, my views on people who have been incarcerated and convicted of felonies are this: A, if you've served your time, you served your time. You get your rights back. Okay. Second off, if they're too dangerous to be trusted with their rights, they shouldn't be out of prison in the first place. Okay. Third off, there is no room for second class citizens in America. There's just not. You're either a citizen with all the rights and privileges that entails, or you're not. And if you're a ward of the state, i.e., in confinement, on parole, or probation, then you're a ward of the state, not a citizen. That is how I view it. You lost your rights for a time until you've been trusted. And once the state has trusted you to not be under their ward anymore, it makes no sense that you can't be trusted with all of your rights. So, fourth, way I view things is not necessarily what you've done, but what you plan to do going forward. So, in my life, I've encountered my fair share of people who have been convicted of felonies that are out and about, whether they're still technically wards because of parole or whether they have fully finished their uh, obligation to the state for what they did. Now, just like any group of people, you get a mixed bag. I've met people who I don't call friends for a reason, that were arrogant, wanted to start a fight over every little thing, and had no problem threatening people. Those people exist. I do not doubt that, and I do not disagree with that. However, I've also run into my fair share of people who have actually turned their life around, recognize what they did, recognize that it was wrong, and they're not going to do it again. And they're going to strive to follow the straight and narrow. Now, I believe that we all have obligations. The specifics of the obligation that you may have as a person will vary, just like we all vary individually. For me, my obligations are A, to myself, to make sure that I see every day and the next day. It's a quintessential reason for why I choose to carry a firearm. Okay? So that if somebody ever tried to dissuade me of that obligation, I have the leverage necessary to turn that argument back in my favor. Furthermore, I have an obligation to my child. Not only that I see another day, but that he sees another day and the next day after. And anybody, again, that would try to dissuade that obligation or prevent me from fulfilling that obligation, that's why I carry a firearm. Again, to have the leverage necessary to make sure that obligation gets fulfilled. So, just like anybody else, felons have the same kind of thing. I've met felons who, again, like I said, have turned their life around, and they have children, and they are desperately trying to make sure that their children not only have a good life, but continue to see every day and the next day after. Now, how can I expect to fulfill my obligations and then try to deny them of theirs? And here's the thing: no matter what laws you pass, no matter what rights you try to take away, those obligations remain the same. So, that being said, I guess you know my take on it. Now, personally, going back to the very first thing, if you served your time, you served your time, you get your rights back. I believe anybody who has gotten off of reward of the state status, again, confinement, probation, and parole, you get your rights back and you should be able to pack heat like the rest of us. Unfortunately, that viewpoint is not held by a majority of the populace, and more importantly, the people that make the laws. Now, I am not an attorney. I am not qualified to give legal advice. If you take legal advice from this video, you're an idiot, and you should really contact your own attorney and do your own research. But a brief synopsis, and this is only going to focus on basically federal and Texas law together, but a brief synopsis of what you are able to obtain as a felon for the purpose of personal protection, self-defense, are black powder firearms. And that's going to be combining the federal definition and the state of Texas definition. A firearm that is designed and made before 1898 that does not take centerfire or rimfire metallic cartridges, and or a reproduction of such that also does not take centerfire or rimfire ammunition. Now, basically that leaves you with black powder, okay? And black powder firearms specifically that do not take cartridges. So cartridge conversions, out of the question for you. So really that's going to leave you with, in my opinion, the only viable options out of the many black powder options there are that still follow within legal guidelines for you. It's going to leave you with the Remington New Model Army, or the 1858 colloquially known, a Colt 1860 model, and as far as a rifle, if you choose to own one, the Remington revolving carbine. Now, why I'm going to prefer, for my tastes, these specific options, and actually I'm just going to leave out the 1860. I mentioned it to mention it. It's been mentioned. I prefer the Remington. So, Remington is a 44 caliber, which will give you sufficient stopping power, even out of the shorter barrel, like the 5-inch Sheriff model, which is the one I own. But the 8-inch will give you even more stopping power, which, again, when you add in the fact you get 6 rounds, technically 5 if you want to load it safely, but at least with the Remington, theoretically you can use the safety notches to have all 6 cylinders loaded. You do you. Figure out what's a safe practice for you and your situation. Leave it at that. But again, the Sheriff's model, which, like I said, is what I own, is more conducive to carrying every day than the full 8-inch barreled version. But if you are open carrying, you can carry both. But it's difficult, but you can conceal carry the Sheriff's model with the 5-inch barrel. Now, I know certain people run rifles for home defense, and in some situations that makes sense, and others it doesn't. If you're in an apartment, probably not the best idea. But say you're out in the country, rural area, you are a disenfranchised class like a felon, and you wanted a rifle. I like the revolving carbine because, again, you get 6 shots of 44 coming out of a rifle barrel, which is going to increase your stopping power to a point. Compared to a lot of options out there, namely the Hawken, which is another black powder I would desperately love to get my hands on at some point. But compared to the Hawken, where you get your 1 shot and you're done, say you miss, now you got to spend a whole 5 minutes reloading. Not very great, right? At least with the revolving carbine, you get 6 shots. You can get more if you have extra cylinders, but that's a whole other topic. But those are your options. Now, people are going to ask, well, they could always go through and get their rights restored. Well, let me tell you this. Federally, that's not possible, really. I believe the ATF has basically closed down, and they're the ones responsible for that, have basically closed down that whole part of their operation. And in Texas, it ain't happening. Out of all of the qualified candidates that apply for a pardon, a full pardon for rights restoration, I think we may do 300 a year. Yeah, you're not going to be on that short list. You're just not. So, now, after seeing, if you are one of the disenfranchised people in this country that has been convicted of a felony, and you see this video and you say, I don't know, black powder, I want to stay within the law, trying to rebuild my life, do what's right, but that just doesn't seem like a viable option, especially if I'm going to be relying on it to protect my family, and yeah, it's not a great option. If you choose to go about obtaining something more potent and more viable, that's on you. I mean, I understand, and I don't blame you. But should you be found out, the ramifications aren't good. So, make the best determination for you and your situation. I'm not responsible for you. You're a individual who has their own moral agency. You do you. Speaking of the potential inviolability of black powder, there are some things you need to be aware of. Black powder, as far as reliability for combustion, isn't the greatest. There are things you can do to increase that reliability to a point, but you're always going to be inferior to modern cartridge firing handguns. Furthermore, which something that is very, very relevant to today in what's going on in the world with shortages and lack of production and production shortfalls. Primers, or excuse me, percussion caps for percussion cap revolvers like the 1858 and the revolving carbine version of it are basically unobtainium right now. The Sheriff's model I have in my safe has not been fired since I bought it over a year ago because there are no caps. Now, theoretically, you can make your own and or use the little flash caps that cap guns use. I mean, you do you. It's not a great option. There are potential downsides as far as blowing off a finger, putting that I've read about people who have literally blown open their finger because the cap goes off when they're installing it on the nipple of the cylinders. Also, homemade caps may not be as reliable as factory-made caps, and that's saying something, because they're not always that reliable themselves as factory-made, but in a pinch, I mean, you do what you gotta do, I guess. But, and it's unfortunate to say that you are disenfranchised and treated like garbage in this country, despite turning your life around. But there's a bit of truth to you made the choices you made. Now, if it was up to me, I'd give you a second chance. But you do you. And if you are out there watching this as a felon and you're doing your damnedest to walk the straight and narrow, keep it up. The only one that can determine what you're going to do in your life is you. But I hope that you choose to keep walking that path. And maybe one day we'll change the laws and get you back to where you should be, which is the same as any of the rest of us. So, if you disagree with this video, smash that dislike button. You can even write a nasty comment in the comment section. I really don't care. I'll probably not respond to it, and if I do, it'll probably be months later. So that's all for this video. Have fun. Cobalt out.